When it comes to American slasher flicks of the 60s and 70s, it's a rather complicated period given that the subgenre had yet to be defined in, let's call it, classical Hollywood terms. So films we now attribute to the slasher subgenre were back then more likely to be considered somewhere between heightened murder mysteries and exploitation cinema. Sure, giallo already existed in Italy and splatter flicks were their own beast entirely, but when I revisit early slasher flicks, and I mean almost pre-80s, I find myself reminded how safe and uninspired most modern examples typically are, or rather, in a less snobby sense, I feel utterly disillusioned again. I understand the argument that slasher flicks have technically made a bit of a resurgence lately, but for me, they just don't click in the way that they used to, so going back to early examples is my soul-searching way to rekindle that lost flame. Bluntly speaking, I miss the jank, the sense of pure unorthodox. And I don't mean like the self-aware meta B-movie type shit that you see today, where it's all like, lol, look how quirky and eccentric we are, we're trying to be subversive, when really it's not. I'm talking about a film that isn't being a tryhard, that isn't trying to reinvent the wheel or try to make you rethink how you see movies. I want something that is simple, strange, a backroad slasher where in the long term is, yeah, likely very forgettable, but in the moment you're left going, what the hell just happened? Well, welcome to Tourist Trap. Now, just before we dive into the madness, this video is sponsored by Raycon. From early mornings to late nights, Mum is always on the go, so this Mother's Day, why not treat her to a pair of Raycon's everyday earbuds, because she deserves a moment to relax, recharge, and enjoy her favorite music, audiobooks, podcasts, and calls with crystal clear sound. If you're like me, gift buying can be difficult, but Raycon's everyday earbuds are perfect for any mother for any occasion, whether they're at the gym, busy with work, running errands, or out enjoying a leisurely walk in the sun. Raycon's latest model is better than ever, with a 32-hour battery life, multi-point connectivity to pair two devices at once, and with quick charge functionality, 10 minutes of charging yields 90 minutes of battery, so your mum can keep herself energized with good sounds all day long. I especially love their active noise cancellation, which is often difficult to find at such an accessible price point, but with Raycon I can block out surrounding sounds and completely zone out and detox after a long, stressful day, which I'm sure any mother can relate to. Everyday earbuds come in a spectrum of vibrant colors to match your mum's style, and if ultimately they're not to her liking, Raycon offers a 30-day happiness guarantee return policy, no questions asked. Starting at half the price as other premium audio brands, go to buyraycon.com/Ryan today to get 20% off site-wide and make your mum feel special this Mother's Day. Tourist Trap is a 1979 supernatural slasher that tells the story of a group of friends who find themselves trapped in a long-abandoned tourist attraction where they're stalked and killed by a mysterious masked assailant with telekinetic powers. It's exactly what it says on the tin, however what begins as a relatively schlocky affair slowly morphs into what I think is a rather engaging murder mystery where, yes, to modern standards, you'll work out the twists and turns pretty quickly, but keep in mind it's over 45 years old, yet it has a few decent emotional story beats and sinister surprises to keep you compelled right to the very end. It feels redundant to say movies like this walked so slashers of today can run, but if you're well versed in horror filmography, you'll probably start to notice the various creations that inspired the film, and even more so vice versa. For one, I just cannot get past how many skeletal similarities there are to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which released upon the world 5 years before it, but conversely, you might recall the 2005 remake of House of Wax, which is notably very different from the 1953 remake. That latter comparison will make more sense when we start talking about Tourist Trap's infamous depiction of mannequins. I mean, seriously, if you hate creepy dolls, this movie is pure nightmare fuel. Anyway, the story wastes no time getting to the point as a group of friends called Becky, Molly, and Jerry travel along a rural road until they find their other friend Eileen trying to fix a punctured tire. She tells them her boyfriend Woody has gone down the road to find help, to which we see him arriving at a deserted truck stop where he soon finds himself trapped in a room of supernatural origins. He gets his arm trapped in the door while trying to escape, leading to several creepy-ass dolls to emerge and begin to fiendishly laugh at at him before objects violently throw themselves at him, including a metal pipe that pierces his back, to which the film sound becomes suddenly absent, as though all life was vanquished from the room. A faint whisper can be heard, but before our eyes can linger around the room any further, we return to Woody's friends. When you account for other horror films at the time, this one might as well be borderline avant-garde compared to the conventional slasher setup you might be expecting, and it's largely emblematic of why I think the film kept me so compelled. Technically, if you remove the supernatural component, the film almost has nothing going for it, but now that we have dolls and mannequins that take on sentient qualities, a killer who literally doesn't need to be in the same room, and stylistic choices that reflect the unearthly feel of the killings, suddenly expectations become a little unpredictable. From here, we see the group travel along the desolate road in search of Woody, only to encounter an infamous tourist trap known as Slosson's Lost Oasis, which you could say is a poetically fitting title given what we eventually learn about its owner. When their car mysteriously breaks down upon arrival, the girls go skinny dipping in the Oasis because we're still holding on to remnants of the free-spirited hippie exploitation era until they're confronted by the owner, Mr. Slosson, who laments on the failure of his park before kindly offering to drive the group back to his museum until their car troubles are resolved. Now, what's interesting about Mr. Slosson is that he's played by actor Chuck Connors, who is excellent in the role. I don't know anything about the actor, but it seems he was sort of like the John Wayne of television, where he basically became the go-to charismatic cowboy for westerns. The assumption I get from his casting and being so heavily credited on the film is that he's meant to play against typecast because he is such a likable, charming presence, but look, let's not beat around the bush here, you know you cannot trust him. However, that said, what speaks volumes for his performance is fuck me did he make me constantly doubt my prediction. He's basically Norman Bates in Psycho, he's just too gentle and accommodating, and it takes great casting and a great performance to truly sell that manipulation. I assumed it was trying to lead me to think it would be him, only to then pull the rug from under me. Mr. Slosson establishes strong sympathy when he explains that his wife passed away just as his business closed due to a highway that overshadowed the park, and the reason he still lives there and maintains it is because it serves as a peaceful memento of his late wife. It casts a tragic shadow over the park, just as an ominous one emerges from a dormant house close by that Mr. Slosson jokingly, albeit sternly, explains is occupied by someone called Davy. Davy is of course our killer, and reveals himself after Eileen decides to pull the Velma card and investigate the house, believing Mr. Slosson is hiding something and perhaps even Woody, which is a very strong suspicion that comes out of nowhere. She discovers the house creepily occupied by mannequins and very strong psycho vibes, before Davy confronts her with his showboating telekinesis, eventually strangling her to death with her own scarf. Now, I know it's not as iconic compared to Leatherface or Myers, but I find Davy's mask to be so subtly and inherently off-putting. It has a strikingly uncanny valley vibe where it mixes waxy mortician's makeup with a stark deadness behind the eyes. Dare I say, there's something kinda corpse-like about it that sort of fits with what we eventually learn about Davy's MO. Back at the museum, Mr. Slosson returns to reflect further on his wife, who he says died in his arms from cancer, before heading down to the house to find Davy, only to discover Eileen has been seemingly transformed into a mannequin. I only suspected this because it's immediately mirrored in the next scene where Molly and Becky discuss how the central mannequin in the museum seems to resemble Mr. Slosson's wife, thus foreshadowing the inevitability that Mr. Slosson is not exactly right in the head. In fact, what's most chilling of all is how Molly describes how the mannequin feels like flesh, which is accentuated to eerie effect thanks to the surreal music box tune underlaying it. After it's explained that Mr. Slosson has taken Jerry into town to find a mechanic, the girls decide to go to the house to find Eileen, who they assume is trying to woohoo Davy, given she's apparently the feisty promiscuous one, despite the fact she has a missing boyfriend end. Naturally, Becky is stalked and soon attacked by Davey, but interestingly, she manages to incapacitate him, which causes the music and supernatural ambient noises to cut out, much like what happened to Woody, thus implying she disrupted his psychic abilities. It's from here where the film takes a genuinely unique and psychologically nightmarish turn, when Becky is tormented by the mannequins that seemingly begin to taunt her. Now look, my relationship with mannequins in horror is pretty complicated. The only ones I've genuinely found palpably scary are the ones in Condemned Criminal Origins. Anyone who's ever played that game will know what I'm talking about. But the use of trance-like eerie vocals and subtle visuals really does a powerful job at slowly unraveling the film's world into this dark, strange fantasy of sorts. Following this, Davey restrains Becky in the basement where Jerry has been held captive this entire time, along with a girl called Tina, who's being prepared to be killed and converted into a mannequin. We're told that Davey is Mr. Sluizen's brother, just as he returns to drunkenly party and harass the group while covering Tina's face in plaster, before telepathically hypnotizing her into literally having a heart attack. Davey goes on to explain in a fittingly confused and deranged fashion that he's bitterly plotting to kill his brother because he's being forced to wear masks and remain in the house unseen, rather than allowing his talents to be seen by the world. It's suggested by Davey that this entire fiasco comes down to his brother being paranoid that his wife would fall in love with Davey, thus causing this bizarre sibling rivalry. By the way, a really neat but incredibly sinister detail is that Davey sometimes wears accessories owned by his latest victims as though impersonating them. So when he confronts Becky, he's wearing Woody's hat and blue scarf, and then when attacking Molly, he's wearing Eileen's red scarf. During all of this, Jerry does attempt to escape on several occasions, while Molly begins a search of her own, only to then be chased by Davey, who's carrying a mannequin head molded from Woody that screams with his disembodied voice. It psychologically gets under both you and the protagonist's skin. It all but confirms that Davey has basically trapped his victims' souls inside the mannequins, so we can arguably deduce that each one we see is an actual person. Molly eventually escapes, but not before Davey throws her Woody's head, which screams her name in agony. Soon after, she's picked up conveniently by Mr. Sluizen, who explains he's going to confront his brother before calling the police. He reassures and affirms trust in Molly by giving her his shotgun for protection, which she does actually end up using on Davey rather than some cliche hesitating bullshit where he grabs the gun, but obviously the shotgun is filled with blanks. Davey gets up and mocks her, but she smartly decides to wallop him with the shotgun, giving us that classic House of Wax moment of the mask breaking away to reveal Mr. Sluizen and Davey are the same person. Look, it's unfair for me to be a smartass here because, let's face it, the movie is over 45 years old, and I've seen twists like this countless times before. I have no doubt that this reveal was genuinely shocking in its time, because they made a real conscious effort to hide it, not only by having Chuck Connors play against type, but Davey is even credited under a fake name called Cheryl Kobe, which is actually a combination of Connors' own kids' names. Ultimately, it's the mystery of the mannequins that keeps the supernatural component fresh, which leads to a rather interesting and harrowing conclusion. From here, Molly tries to flee into the swamp, but Mr. Sluizen somehow seems to teleport into the water behind her, and next we find him feeding a mannequin of Davey and using his powers to converse with it, echoing that Norman Bates' dead mother relationship. During this, Jerry and Becky finally escape and find Mr. Sluizen playing with his mannequins like a child before he proceeds to chase them, causing Jerry to bail out the fucking window. I mean, not exactly ideal, but I guess it works. Mr. Sluisen switches his attention to Becky, eventually killing her in the museum in a similar fashion to Woody, where mannequins shoot and throw things at her until a knife gets lodged in the back of her head. Now, where things get truly bizarre is when we return to Molly. We find her hallucinating visions of a mannequin's human form caring for her as she suffers delirium, before Mr. Sluisen brings her to the attic, where the mannequins once again begin to move and torment poor Molly, who breaks down in horror. It's strongly implied that Mr. Sluisen is performing some form of ritual before explaining to Molly that he regrettably killed his brother and wife after discovering they had an affair, and his motive is to make Molly a reincarnation of her. Ultimately, however, Mr. Sluisen has simply become plagued by delusion and insanity, which ends up being the case for Molly as well, who is seemingly saved by Jerry, only to discover he is already a mannequin. It's a surreal and remarkably intense climax, as a traumatized Molly begins seeing the spirits of Mr. Sluisen's victims, including his own wife, and is mocked again by the deformed mannequins before finally bringing the madness to an end by fatally hacking Mr. Sluisen on the back of the neck with an axe. However, the film doesn't grant you any reprieve from the madness, and instead cements it further with the final shot that sees Molly drive away with the mannequins of her best friends as she glares menacingly, almost like a bizarre homage to Texas Chainsaw's ending, where even though she gets away, her sanity is still trapped and left behind. Yeah, I think it's a fairly ballsy way to end. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have a request or recommendation for a future video, do let me know about it in the comments below or on social media. And until next time, stay safe, stay away from mannequins, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.